Hi there, my name's Graham England. I'm very excited to be presenting here. Thank you for coming. So first of all, I'm going to give you a couple of warnings right now. The first is that this is my first chance at public speaking, so you have no idea how nervous I am, which is why I've got some cheat cards here. If I drop them, we're all in trouble. And secondly, this is about 90 minutes of content crammed down to 20 minutes, so I'm going to do my best to go through it. Hopefully, what you're going to see is going to inspire you to do good things with the functional testing aspects of Micro Focus's tools. This is really just a show and tell of what we've done over the years, and our challenges and our solutions. And I can already hear my voice starting to break, so I'm just picturing everyone naked just so that you know it helps. So first of all, a bit about the company. So I work for Travelport. We are headquartered in the UK. You can probably tell from my accent, it's Graham England from England, but I now live in the USA. So our company, we are a global technical company, and we build travel industry solutions. It's a shame that I had to look at my cards to find out what I do. I work at the Denver office in Colorado in the Test Automation Center of Excellence. A little bit about my personal background. I started out, as you can see from this picture here, it's pretty scary. I had a lot more hair and I had a lot less weight. But you can see here from the daisy wheel printer and the acoustic hood just how far back this goes. So I started out as a developer for about the first 9 years, and then got into test automation and discovered it's actually a lot more exciting than developing. I really love it, and hopefully there's a few of you that say, yes, me too. We had a number of tool changes as I've moved at different companies and even within our own company. And I had a common library of functions which did all sorts of cool things. And every time we changed tool, oh great, I've got to take that and I've got to reinvent the wheel, do it with a slightly different syntax. So in 2003, I came up with the bright idea of creating a .NET function library so that if we changed tools, there was a good likelihood I'd be able to call those same methods and not have to rewrite it, which was a great idea, but we never changed tools. We went to QTP, now UFT. I've loved it, we've used it ever since. So we've still got this library out there, but now as we're starting to move forward, and I'm going to make a bit of a lean towards lean FT, no pun intended. So what we're going to do with this is also to give the Java developers a chance to get involved in this. I've made a Java equivalent of our common library. So what are some of the challenges that we've faced at Travelport? As you can see from what we have up on the board here, is a very wide range of different solutions. And I'm talking everything from PC3270 to web services and whatever. If there is a technology out there, I guarantee we're using it somewhere. So we needed a tool that was one tool for everything, and that's what we found with UFT. I promise I'm not being paid commission for this. So our real solution was not just the tools, but also a complete framework around it, because that is just as important, and that's what I'd like to get across for anyone that's maybe starting on this, is to get yourself a framework that works for your company and the projects that you get involved in. So for us, obviously the right tool is very important. We've been using UFT for 16 years. And now we're starting out with Lean FT and having very good results with it. And that's more for the BDD, TDD, the behavioral-driven development and test-driven development, DevOps, whatever you want to call it, CI/CD. Other parts of our framework, we have about 300 virtual machines, and we'll talk more about these things later. A central test data and results repository, scheduling and reporting website, coding standards, and backup and version control. So these are all the things that make up what we call the test factory. So when we get new people getting involved with what we do at Travelport, so many people have come up and said, why are you using such a dinosaur like UFT? I mean, that's been around forever. There's a reason it's been around forever, is because it's very good, it's very adaptable, it'll cover all sorts of tools and technologies. Also, as we can see from up here, we have multi-browser support, i.e. Edge, Chrome, Firefox, Safari, Phantom.js, etc. And these are really key factors to why we've kept with it. Also, to be able to access native objects and methods of the application under test. And also, if anyone's played with Insight, it's kind of hidden away there a little bit, but if you've got an application that is really hard to be able to automate, Insight is a way of doing it all graphically. There are limitations to that. It's not something I would do except as a last resort, but it's good to have that as an option. And there's other things in here. The other thing I'll really pick out is the 24/7 support. I've got to say, I've got total admiration for the support guys at MicroFocus, particularly for LeanFT, because, as we're going to talk about later, because it integrates with all these other things like NUnit and JUnit, Cucumber, Visual Studio, Eclipse. These are all things that the support guys have a good understanding about. So if you say, I've got a problem with LeanFT trying to connect to this and trying to connect to that, they'll be able to give you some good advice, good support, and that certainly for me has really helped. While I was a developer many years ago, not only do I not fit in that same sweater anymore, but also it's totally different tools to what I was using back then. Thankfully, no daisy wheel printers. So it was a natural progression for us to go from UFT to LeanFT. The common libraries that I talked about earlier, what do they provide? Why do we do this? Well, first of all, it gives us, so this is very focused on what we've done at Travelport, but what we have is a common result log format. This allows us, so whatever tool we're using, whatever thing that we're testing, be it an API or a website, a web service, whatever it is, we have the ability to have the same format of test results, very easy to read, all HTML, and then that is also very portable. If we want to send it to a project manager or a developer, we don't have to worry that our format it requires something special to open it. So these are some of the things that went into the common library. In addition to that, we've also got around 300 functions for handling all sorts of things like database and spreadsheets, date time, text parsing, security, email file handling, that sort of thing. So it saves a lot of extra work coding within the tool that you're using. So that's why we have the common library. Virtual machines, I'm not going to go through all of this, but we have two sets of virtual machines that we create, factory and factory dev. The factory machines, very few people have access to, and these are what we schedule our test runs on. So it's a very clean environment. We know someone hasn't gone and done something funky and installed a new version of Java that makes things go funky. On the other side, we have factory dev machines. Now, these developer machines we give to everyone that comes into our group. So I'm guessing we have a shared service agreement, and I think we have around 250 people that get involved in the automation, which blows me away when I look at a picture a while back of the team, which comprised of me. Probably still wearing that sweater. And the thing that we find with this is that the factory dev machines, if someone messes something up, we can just recreate a new machine for it, give it to them. They've got all the tools and the access that they need. And then once they've got their automated tests running successfully, then they can put them into the scheduler and they can have them run on the factory machines while they go on to develop new things. Okay, so this is just a quick glance at what our test execution looks like. The question would be, why do we have a homegrown system for scheduling? And the answer to that is because we've been doing this a long time, and back then ALM, for those of you that remember, had a very basic way of scheduling tests. So if you wanted to run a test every Monday and Thursday at 8 o'clock in the morning, it wasn't possible. Now with ALM, you do have a plugin that enables you to be able to do all of that very nicely. But we've carried on using this because it's everyone's used to it, and it's proven to be very flexible, and we can run tests on demand or on a schedule. Anybody in the company can trigger these things and then watch for results to be emailed out to them. So moving on to the reports that come out of our website. You'll see on the left-hand side, I'm not the best web developer by far. It's not pretty, but it's functional. I think that's what my wife says about me. But so we have these website reports. The upper one that you can see is here's all the tests that we've been running, and we can see from the colors, green is good, red is bad. We can see that the responses from ALM, if maybe a script is missing or something like that. This is all useful information. We can see the number of passes and failures, that kind of thing. The lower screen capture that we have here is a snapshot of what's going on with all our virtual machines. So we can look at this and we can say, oh, hello, 2 of those machines are showing in red. We can see that this is a problem. Maybe they didn't boot up properly. They're probably installing Windows updates, so they're offline for a week. And we can get a chance to get those back up to speed. And we can also see tests that are running and get to the latest results. So this is kind of the stuff that we've done. I'm not saying everyone has to go into that kind of level, but it has been useful. And out of all this, on average right now, we run about 2,000 test sets per month get executed. Which equates to, I can't believe this, 726,000 validations. That's pass-fail tests across the board. That's all the different projects. A quick glance at the layers that we have. Starting at number 1, so we have our scheduler. We have our test factory scheduler, and this is where the website and you say what you want to run. Step 2 is every virtual machine on the factory machines, they have this scheduling client. It's VB-Script, very simple, and it just looks at a database and says, what do you have that I can execute? I'm allowed to run that one? Okay, I'm going to lock it and do it. That scheduling client then talks to ALM through its API, and it says, I want to execute this. ALM, of course, talks to the test tool, usually UFT, and then underneath that, you've got the application being tested. And then the results from that get passed from 5 up through 1. Now, in a BDD, TDD environment, it's probably a good idea to use a build manager such as Jenkins or VSTS in the Microsoft world, and that can replace 1 through 3, I did say that right, to do your testing there. We also have version control. Because our UFT scripts are already in ALM, we use ALM's version control, makes sense. For everything else, and I would recommend that everybody does this, is you have some kind of version controlling for your data, your test data, your documentation, all that kind of stuff, common libraries. So we have all that, and we personally use SVN because we've been doing it for a while. But you can use other tools in a BDD environment such as Git or VSTS. You might recognize this picture here. It actually came from MicroFocus's website. And so as we're starting to move towards Lean FT, so if we look to the right-hand side of this diagram, we can see as a business expert, a subject matter expert, SME, they're going to be using BPT, Business Process Testing, which, as I learned this morning's seminar, is going to be changing to UFT Business. See, I learned something too. For people, now we don't use that at Travelport. Our focus really is UFT. We have a lot of test automation engineers, and they work with the SMEs, they create the tests. And that's probably, can I have a show of hands? How many people do it in that way, that you have a test automation person that creates the stuff with UFT? Okay, oh good, that's quite a few. Okay, that's great. So that's the way we've been doing things for many years, but now as we move more towards the left, we have the automation expert. This is where I get to put that sweater back on, and I get to play around with the dev tools. And as a dev tester, you have more focus on the IDEs such as Visual Studio or Eclipse, IntelliJ, and you can kind of bring everything together with your testing, and it also packages very nicely with the actual product that's being tested if you want to go that route. So it opens up whole new avenues, it's also, I think, very good because it gets the developers to start to move a little bit more towards the testing aspects, and it also allows the tester to be able to move more into a development background. And so by doing it that way, you can really collaborate and really help to shift left. Lean FT, as I mentioned earlier, integrates with so many different tools that your developers are probably already more than familiar with. I wish I'd had a closer relationship with our developers when I was playing around with all this stuff, because I'm like, what's Jenkins? Wait, what does NUnit do? You know, that kind of stuff. So it is a big learning curve. Hopefully you'll get some help with it. But if you do get that collaboration, you'll be both the developers and the testers will be able to help one another. And it is true, we can work together, and it can be a wonderful rainbow sky with unicorns. And that brings me to the next slide, which is how we went about our BDD, TDD approach, and I'm just going to say for .NET at the moment. So first of all, we would develop our C# tests in Visual Studio so that it can talk to our .NET library. And then we'd use NUnit to do the testing framework side of it, and then optionally SpecFlow. SpecFlow is the .NET version of Cucumber. And then we'd integrate the test factory framework using our .NET Common Library. And then optionally, we would build and deploy the code with tests in a VSTS pipeline. And then lastly, optionally running the tests on those factory machines that I talked about earlier. You could, of course, do it on the build machine itself, depending on what you are trying to do. And in this snapshot here, if you have bionic eyes, for those of you that are old enough like me to know what bionic means, you can see in here we have several windows. We can see our test script. It's the hooks file, and that's where we've got all our event handling for actually doing the testing. And in there is how I link into our common library. The lower window in the middle, that's where we see our Gherkin format feature file. So this is what drives the test. This is what says, you know, if I see this, I want to click this, and then I want to validate that. That is really what drives your tests. And then at the very forefront, you might be able to see there's a window called the Object Identification Center. And that really is like the Object Spy for UFT. You can then go click on your app, find the way to identify that particular object, and then you save it into the application model. The application model is very similar to the object repository in UFT. So that's why coming from UFT and moving into a more developer role, you've already got a head start. You know the concepts behind it. You can also, incidentally, record your scripts, so you can interact with your application, and it can be, with the Object Identification Center, it can be actually recording those steps in either C# or JavaScript, or if you're doing this in Eclipse, you know, it'll do it in Java. That's actually a pretty unique feature. And then from there, obviously, you start to flesh it out with, you know, with more code. That's not where I was expecting to go to. Okay, there we go. So the Java equivalent of that, I'm not going to go too deep. It's pretty much the same thing, but instead of Eclipse, instead of Visual Studio, you're using Eclipse. You're using Java as opposed to C#. You're using JUnit and not NUnit, and you're using Jenkins and not VSTS. So same kind of concepts. Moving on to how the execution of data actually comes about. So the dev tester commits their test code, potentially with the application itself. They commit that to a Git bucket repository that we have. The dev tester tells Jenkins, go ahead and build the project. Jenkins updates the test set to run in our scheduling database. The scheduler assigns the test set to run on a particular factory machine. That factory machine gets the test set from ALM. It gets the test data from shared storage, and it gets that test code from Git bucket. So that's how it gets everything it needs to run. And then as far as passing on the results, the factory machine writes the results to the shared storage, it writes it to ALM, and it writes it to the scheduling database. Meanwhile, Jenkins, that's doing this build, is sitting there and it's looking at the database and it's saying, are you done yet? And then eventually, it'll see the results, it gets that, and it can then decide, do I carry on with my build or do I stop it? I don't know how we're doing on time, but I'm going to quickly mention some of the gotchas. There were a lot of issues that I had trying to put this system together. A real problem when you've got lots of other components where you don't have support for. And so, first of all, it's trying to learn where do I download these things? How do I work with Git? How do I do this? How do I do that? For me, there was a lot to learn in a short space of time, but it is worth taking that time learning how to do it. There's plenty of stuff out on YouTube, or if there's anyone from England here, YouTube. So you've got plenty of places you can go to and get this kind of information, see how it's done, and then try and apply it in your own little project area. And the more you learn, the more excited to learn, and then you fall into another pit hole, and then you have to work your way through that. But it is good. There is a light at the end of the tunnel. Google is your friend. One other thing I will mention is Visual Studio. If you're going in the .NET route, one thing that a lot of people came to me after I put this together, they complained, there's no way I'm going to buy a copy of Visual Studio for every one of our testers. And it's like, I understand that. But the good news is you don't have to buy the Enterprise Edition, which is what all of our developers have, because you've got an annual, very expensive cost for MSDN, there we go. So you've got that cost of MSDN and the licenses. That's an expensive deal. But for this, all you need is the Visual Studio Professional. And I'm going to say it's around just under $300. And with that, you get everything that you need, and it's a one-time cost. I'll let you read the slide for some of the other gotchas that we ran into. So next steps, what we have to do next, we want to get, actually, I can say just before leaving to fly here, I managed to complete number 1, yes. So now everything that was in the Java Common Library, it can now work in a non-Windows environment. I was amazed to see all these functions running in Linux. So I want to dive deeper into that. I also want to dive deeper into using Docker containers. So that instead of using our factory machines, our scheduling mechanism and ALM, we'll be able to actually have these things run in containers, execute, back come the results. So this is an exciting next step. That's what I do when I get back from Chicago. And one thing I'd like to do as well, I need to get the company's buy-in on this, is to create some functional videos, because there was so much that I had to learn the hard way, and thankfully a lot of help from some very good technical people at MicroFocus. But I'd like to create some videos that will kind of give some guides on to how to put all this together and then publish it on YouTube. And that's what I'd like to do, but I can't promise it. I have to get that approved first. Management was extremely excited because Travelport has moved into to using SAFe, the scaled agile framework. So for us, there was a lot of challenges, but LeanFT really helps you to achieve that. Move the dev testers, the testers, and the developers, mash them up together, working on teams. So this has worked very well, and I think it's really going to take off. So that's why it's been my focus for quite a while. So there we go. That's it. Thank you very much for listening. I think we have a few minutes for questions and answers. That's scary. There's got to be at least one at the back here. The different tiers and roles. So the question is the tiers and roles of everyone involved in the testing.
Well, like for example, you mentioned your core libraries. I imagine only a certain role updates the libraries so that not everybody's in there mucking them up. So
yes.
That kind of roles and responsibilities.
Yeah, that's right. That's a good point. Hopefully I understand the question correctly. So where we have our shared data and we have certain folders, for example, if we had someone who is an SME and is not going to be touching the automation side, they have the rights to be able to go in and make any changes to the test data. And it is all version controlled, as I mentioned. So if someone does do something bad, it can be rolled back quickly. But then if it's someone that's going to be doing the actual automation side of it, or the developers, then they have a heightened access to be able to go into the common libraries and make changes. And even then, I kind of question, are you sure you need to do this, and whatever. So we keep a close eye on it. And with our dashboard of seeing what's going on and seeing if machines are having problems running tests and things like that. It helps us to find who's doing what. It is a little bit of a challenge. So we do have the SMEs that are just working in test data. We have the dev testers that are kind of a jack of all trades. It's kind of what I'd consider myself to be. And then you've got the developers that have their big focus on the libraries. Did that answer the question? Great. Are there any others?
So Graham, do you see the automation engineers continuing to use UFT and the developers use LeanFT going forward, or are you gonna expect a transition from those UFT users to like more of a mainly LeanFT for future testing?
Got you. Well, according to my magic 8-ball, the plan is that over time we'll probably migrate totally over to LeanFT. It's still very early. So far, at the moment, this has all been proof of concept, and we've been demoing it a lot, and we've got a lot of interest, but as of yet, we don't have an actual live project that's gone to LeanFT. It's this hot off the press for us. But certainly, with the interest that's being shown, and with the fact that as people are coming in, they probably don't have the experience of VB script, but they're going to be more of the C# and Java guys. So I think it's a natural course for us to be moving totally over to LeanFT, but we have so much that's written with UFT, it's not going to disappear overnight. And I actually do recommend when people come to me in the Center of Excellence and say, where do I start? We do have these getting started guides, but I say, I would recommend for now be using UFT. If you're developing something new, I'd still say use UFT because it's a great all-in-one tool that enables you to do all your testing. But if you're moving into the BDD environment, definitely LeanFT is the right way to be doing it. Did that answer the question? Good. Do we have time for any more? Yeah, are there any other questions? Excellent. Okay, well, if you find me later, if you do have any other questions, if you want to get a better look at any of this, do let me know. I've got some business cards on me. I'm quite happy to have you email me. In fact, there we go. If anyone wants to take a note, I'm not going to promise I'm going to be technical support for everyone. And you wouldn't want that anyway, trust me. But if you want to ping me, if you want to let me know your experiences learning with LeanFT, perhaps, and also let me know if there's anything that you've found as a big problem or anything else. I think it's good that we come together as a community and be able to help one another. So it might be me giving the advice right now, but then when I'm stuck in a couple of months' time, and I say, hey, I'm going to call in a favor now. So I think that would be great. If you want to email me, feel free, go ahead. Other than that, thank you very much. I appreciate your time.